You're listening to the Naturally Noelle Show, brought to you by Noelle's Naturals, all natural products that really work. And now, please welcome entrepreneur, wife, homeschooling mom of four, and founder of the Noelle's Naturals brand of products, your host, Noelle Talley.
Hi friends, welcome to the show today. Our guest today is Dr. Jaban Moore. Dr. Jaban is a doctor of chiropractic and functional medicine practitioner located in Kansas City. He works virtually with clients to assist them in overcoming chronic health conditions. At age 25, he went from being an award-winning college athlete to not being able to get out of bed. He sought out countless doctors looking for answers, but doctors only gave him Band-Aid solutions. He was later diagnosed with Lyme disease. Once he overcame this complex infection, he dedicated his practice to helping clients discover the causes of their symptoms. Dr. Moore specializes in Lyme disease, PANS, PANDAS, autism, parasitic infections, and environmental toxicities. He has loads of information about all of these subjects and so much more on his Instagram page at Dr. Jaban Moore. Today we're going to talk about stress and the nervous system and how this affects women's bodies. I know you're going to learn so much from our talk today. Here we go. Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Jaban. Thanks so much for taking time with us. I know you have a new baby. How's that going?
Oh, I love it. It's what they always say. It changes your world.
So you have you said a 2-month-old baby boy?
Yep, and he's just a little chunk gaining weight, putting on a pound a week right now. So good things happen.
That's great. Good. So I'm sure you're maybe a little tired, a little sleep deprived right now.
Oh, not too bad. He's blessing us with sleeping quite a bit, making it mostly through the night right now.
Wow, that's amazing. You must be having a very calm energy in your home to foster that.
We do what we can. You know, the nervous system is a massive part of my clinic with all my clients. So when my wife had him and we had a bit of a emergency C-section situation where it wasn't ideal, I immediately said, hey, so let's start implementing some strategies of how to come out of this with the best positive outlook we can, because we don't want to let this sit as trauma in your body. I mean, if you recognize this as trauma, mentally, neurologically, then that's going to change your hormones. That's going to affect the neurotransmitters you're putting into the breast milk. So, you know, let's do what we can to not start his life off with too many fight or flight hormones to the best of our ability. I mean, there's only so much you can control, but you know, it was immediate that we were starting on the brain work.
Wow. Yeah, that's so amazing, because I know like most of our listeners are moms, and I know a lot of moms have had traumatic birth experiences. And I mean, you talk about like postpartum hormones by themselves are problematic. Well, I don't want to say problematic, just complicated. It's difficult kind of navigating that time. But when you add on trauma on top of it, that really just kind of compounds things. So would you mind sharing kind of some of the work that you did early on to sort of get through that time?
Yeah. So I actually, when this happened, I got a close friend that is the developer of Primal Trust, which is Kathleen King. And we were texting back and forth because the last thing I want to be is doctor to my wife. I wanted to be in the moment. I wanted to be with my kid. And she said, hey, so here's some things that you can do that are simple, that will help you to change the way that your brain takes in this information. Because there's a couple of choices. You know, we had a placental abruption, rushed to the ER. They're like, okay, you're no choice, C-section right here, right now. Our midwife was with us. She's just like, yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot of choice here. So you're in a situation where your choice has been taken away from you. The plan that my wife had for the entire pregnancy of a home birth is taken away. So that already is stressful enough. Then you add to that, you know, you're scared because her body is bleeding and a lot, right? So there's this trauma, and you're having a surgery. So your body's being cut open, which is another type of trauma, right? That's a physical body harm trauma. And then the fear of like, what's going to happen with our child. Like, we know that vaginal birth is going to be more healthy when it can be done that way. And that's just not an option for us right now. So there's that frustration of the loss of that possibility of getting the microbiome through the vaginal canal and all of the developmental processes that happen from a vaginal birth. So we're just like, you know, And honestly, I think it was harder for her because she's been doing all this research and like you said, most of your audience is women, most of mine is too. And I feel like women maybe do this more than men. They get a vision in their mind and they just, that's it. Like that's what they want. And that's where they're set. Whereas for me, like I never allowed that in my brain. I was just like, yeah, sure. We're going to do a home birth. Great. Cool. You know, that sort of thing in my head. So for us, it was a different experience. So for her, Kathleen said, hey, look, what you need to do is you need to go back through all of what happened and you need to find the positives and you need to talk about the positives. You need to think about the positives. You need to focus on the positives. So immediately I was like, well, you called me right as I walked out of patients and I was able to answer the phone. Whereas most of the time I can't answer for hours. So you were able to like literally talk to me and I was able to respond and react. Not that if I had patients and she texted me at this, that I wouldn't, but I may not have looked at my phone for 30 minutes. So I was able to immediately make a reaction, which was to call my neighbor who has 4 children and a 2-week-old. And he was like, yeah, I will grab her. I'll take her to the hospital for you. So he was able to pick her up, take her to the hospital, which is going to be way faster than even an ambulance at that point. And then we got to the hospital. And because of that time that was saved, it wasn't like right into the OR. It was, we'll talk through what's going to happen. The anesthesiologist and the OB came in. They were able to say, look, here's where we're at. Take a few deep breaths. We'll leave you with your nurse and your midwife that was our team that we're comfortable with. They can walk you through what you expect. And then we went in. It was an uncomplicated C-section. We were able to hold him immediately after, do skin to skin. Even though rules were not supposed to have more than one person go back, she wanted both of her parents to see him at the same time. And because it was the right time of night, there was no one else in the resting room. So they were just like, we're just going to look this way if you guys both sneak through. So she was able to get that. So there were so many blessings in this time. So we really started focusing on those instead of focusing on what we couldn't control. And that's a big thing that I talk to clients about is, and I'm about to tear up. And so if I choke up, I'm sorry. But one of the things that so many of my clients come in, they're so focused on what they cannot control. They're focused on what they've lost. And I know that that's hard and acknowledging the loss is okay, but it's like, how do we shift our mindsets to what we can control, what we have, what we've gained, what we are able to work with? Because whether you have Lyme disease or parasites or, a child that is struggling or you're struggling with fatigue or brain fog, focusing on those things and being relentless with your state of like, I have to get to 100%, whatever that means to you, oftentimes keeps you from getting there because you stick yourself in a fight or flight state, which is a state where your body is panicked because it needs to survive versus a state of, okay, this is where I'm at, which is called parasympathetic. You can digest, you can rest, you can recover, you can allow for your body to heal itself. You're not going to do that in survival mode. So by focusing on those positive things, we were able to, it wasn't easy. I don't want to make it sound like this was easy. Like I was every night saying, hey, let's talk about what was positive today. Let's talk about what was positive at our birth. Let's also open up. And if there's something I'm doing, like tell me, what did I do that you didn't like today? Or what happened today that you didn't like? And then, so that was the first thing, because I wanted to get the negative out of the way also so I could make sure I do better and then go to the positives afterward. And by ending every day with that, we got the right mindset. And then some other things that we were doing were emotional freedom technique, which is like tapping acupuncture points. And you can find different patterns out there that may be more specific to whatever your symptom is that you're trying to work on. So if it's anxiety versus depression versus, some sort of traumatic PTSD type thing. So there's points that you'll tap. So we were doing some of that. And then honestly, just, we were watching church together and we were praying together, because that in itself, those acts separate you from your day-to-day stress, trauma.
Yeah. Gosh, like what a gift for your wife to have you with the knowledge base that you have to be able to support her in that way. Like, imagine if we had husbands having this kind of education on how to support their partners, not just, hey, I'll hold the baby while you take a shower, or, I'm here for you, but really understanding like, hey, like this is actually like a very, I mean, even without that kind of birth trauma, just having a baby, especially your first baby, is such a huge upheaval in your life. It's a wonderful time and a joyous time, but it's hard. As a woman, you've never been needed so much. You've never been touched so much. You're sleep deprived, which I know, I mean, sleep deprivation is a huge, huge burden on the body in a number of ways. And I'd love to hear you kind of talk a little bit more into that. But, I just love how there are so many things that we think like, oh, physically we need to do this, or, oh, I've got postpartum depression, I need to get on a medication. All these things we think like we can fix it. But really, there's so much emotional and mental work to be done to kind of get you into a place where you can have a healthy and thriving postpartum state,
Exactly. You've got to think, because I am by nature more of the extremely logical, very direct guy. Like when you talk to somebody who's been through a ton of school and oftentimes, willing to do all that, like you kind of work a little of the emotion out of you. So that's not necessarily my nature, which is why I called Kathleen, and I'm like, all right, help me out, make sure that my mind's right, make sure I'm in the right place, because I alone am not enough for this. We need our tribe. We need our team around us. And when you think what the body goes through for pregnancy, it's self-sacrificing. You're giving up your nutrients. You're releasing HCG, so human chorionic gonadotrophin, which allows for your body to let your fat stores go and allow for the baby to take those and use those for development and growth, which normally the body won't do, which is why that drug or hormone that has become a drug that is used for weight loss, right? So your body's sacrificing that, which puts it in a position of where it doesn't want to be, right? It's in a position where it's like, I'm giving away, and then you give birth, which is stress and effort, and you lose blood and nutrients. And then now you're breastfeeding, which is giving away nutrients. And if you can't breastfeed, then that's a whole nother stress on a woman. And I've seen that come back to haunt other women in ways where they feel like they're broken or they're not good enough, which is not true, but it happens. And then that beats them up and then takes another toll in a different way. So yeah, as a father and a man and a husband, we can always do better. We can always learn and grow. And unfortunately, not all dads are going to have the opportunity to be in the field I am and have just simply watched it. I just watched it enough from other people that I've worked with, from patients, like, oh, okay, so there's some things I can do. And I'm just trying to go down that path. But when you have all those stressors that I mentioned going into a child, and then you do sleep deprivation, all of these are putting you into that stress state. Well, that stress state is, again, going back to fight or flight, going back to sympathetic overdrive, which is the same thing. It's just different titles. And when you're in that state, a lot of things happen. So first of all, you're more irritable. I don't know if you've ever heard of a woman that is sleep deprived and postpartum that's irritable, but I've heard of one or two times that that's happened.
Couple times, yeah.
So you're irritable, and then you are probably where you stand up and you might get a little dizzy or faint, and you might be a little hungry and a little brain fogged, and you might have this like just tinge of a headache or pressure in your head. Well, this can be because your adrenals are stressed out, your body's stressed out, which releases cortisol hormone, which then puts pounds on around the midsection if you're eating enough, which causes another stress. But by doing that hormone release, then you lose electrolytes because you're in a stress state. So your body's pushing out electrolytes, which is your sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesiums, to allow for your body to continue in stress so that you can continue to move forward day to day. So you can continue to wake up in the night. So you can continue to do all the duties that you need to do. So eventually, if you're not replenishing those, you deplete and then you crash. So with my wife, she's like, and mind you, one of my my patients and I were talking about this, and she's like, wow, you're over the top. And I was just like, well, hold on, wait a minute. We were tracking her calories-ish, making sure that she was at least getting 2,000 calories in, because she was doing a little pumping when we were in the NICU because of a preemie baby. So we knew how many ounces she could pump in a day. And I was like, wow, if just based on the number of calories, you need to eat like 2,200 calories. And she doesn't exactly like to eat, like in general.
I think that's an issue a lot of moms have.
Yeah. So I was like, let's sort of kind of track. Like, I'm not going to like get mad at you if you're not eating enough, but we're going to make an effort to eat enough. Well, there was a period where for a week, she just was like, I don't feel like eating. And like, it makes me nauseous to think about eating. Well, what happens? Okay. Well, now she's starting to get lightheaded. Now she's starting to get stomach aches because her body is having to make milk. So there's this stress response that leads to a cramping of her digestive tract. So now we have gut pain. And then we have tingling and numbness that's slowly starting to creep in. And I'm going, well, what's going on? And it's delicate, right? It's very delicate to be Dr. Daddy. And I'm trying not to be because I know that's going to get me in trouble from all my friends. But I'm like, hey, so like I'm on the way home and maybe my favorite foods aren't the ones that I'm able to get her to eat because, well, again, we're just trying to get her to eat. So there's yogurtini. I'm like, hey, honey, do you want 20 ounces of yogurtini? Not my favorite choice, but will you eat it? And sure enough, the next day she's feeling a little bit better because we got calories in. So then the conversation was able to be had like, okay, we probably need to do a little better job of calories. And then we went back to my organic whole food diet without all the sugar and preservatives. But, there's that give and take there when you're just trying to simply get through and get over the hump. So we were able to do that. So yeah, for women out there, I mean, it doesn't have to be pregnancy that's doing this. If you have 4 kids at home and you also work or don't work, I mean, 4 kids is more than a job by itself. But if you have that going on at home and you're stressed and you're not eating enough because you're waking up and feeding the kids, and then by the time it's time for you to eat, it's lunch, and you might be snacking on something as you're making stuff, but you get all the way to dinner when finally your husband comes home, if you have one and you have that support, and then you're like, oh, here's the kids, let me take 5 minutes to eat for myself. Well, now you're deprived and depleted and your body's stressed because it's not getting food, and you're feeling the same things that my wife was feeling, but you're not any longer breastfeeding. You're not any longer right after birth. So you're like, well, I don't know why this is happening to me, but it could simply be stress.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of dive into that because obviously, like, childbirth and pregnancy, like that's a very kind of acute situation. And typically after that first year, a lot of that regulates and sort of levels out. But let's talk about a chronic state of stress and more specifically, sort of like that inadvertent addiction to stress that we oftentimes can find ourselves in.
Oh, I've got stories for days. So I've got lots of clients that come in, oftentimes a lot for their kids. So I work with a lot of kids. And then the mom's like, well, wait a minute. All this stuff you're talking about for my kid fits me. Moms, I mean, I don't even want to blame moms. Everybody, especially in westernized worlds, this is just us these days. We're just used to stress. We just keep gobbling it up. So I have this mom. She's an amazing woman, superstar at her job, 3 kids, 2 kids with pandas, husband that is very supportive, but she just keeps taking stuff on. Her job is executive assistant to a big time CEO with a huge company. And so she's on call always. I'm like, when's your time to rest? Like, is there time, any time where you can literally turn your phone off for 20 minutes and stare at a tree? And I actually said that to her, 20 minutes to stare at a tree. And she's just like, no. I go, that's a problem. Can you talk to your boss who has yoga and the like mental health instructors and resources all over the business for his employees? I go, I bet he'll give you an hour where you're not on call and you can have another assistant take it. So she did. And I go, okay, for this hour, you're not mommy. For this hour, you're not wifey. For this hour, you're you. What do you enjoy? And it took me months to get her to literally go for a walk for 20 minutes in the morning alone down her street within the block with her cell phone with her. And by the time she finally got there, she's like, I really have a problem. Yeah, you're a superstar. I wish you could work for me because you like crush it in all things business oriented, and I would love employees to be that committed. But I also know that it's not healthy to be at that level, which I appreciate. I'm not taking from her. Like, she's awesome. But that level of commitment, she just kept taking stuff on, taking stuff on, taking stuff on, and it was burying her. So her body wasn't recovering. She had body pain. She was constantly thinking something was going to fall apart. So she had anxiety. So and anybody that has anxiety, by the way, this is what I say to you. Anxiety is a state where your body doesn't feel safe. Something feels like it's going to break. Well, now, whether that's from an inflammation on your brain, parasite poop or bacteria poop, which is an endotoxin that leads to inflammation in the body, stress or trauma in your childhood, or whether it's from the amount of stuff that you have in your life that you feel like is all on you, it leads to this position where your body is in fight or flight. And I know I keep saying that. It all comes back into that where you're there. But once you get there, which is what you were talking about, I know it took a long time to get there. Once you get there, you have hormones that release cortisol. You have adrenaline. And you become addicted to these hormones because they're highs, right? So they push you high. You get this state of like, I feel invincible, or I'm needed, or honestly, cortisol can block your release or make your body not prioritize sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So then those get blocked up or reduced in your body. I see it all the time when we run Dutch tests, and they have super low progesterone and estrogen because their adrenals, which help to produce some of those hormones, are taxed with producing cortisol and cortisone, adrenal hormones. So now they feel good in that state because they're colder. They're not as emotional. They're driven. They're motivated. They're alert because their body has to be to deal with all the stress, to deal with all this stuff. But at the same time, their relationships are being harmed because they're irritable and they're short and they're not emotional and they're not connected the same way that they want to be, which then they recognize, and then that makes them depressed. And it's this vicious cycle and circle that they go through. By the time they get to me, they know what they need to do internally and they can auditorily say it to me, but it's hard to let go and to not necessarily be mainstream all the time and go against that and recognize that health for your body is different. And I was just watching some research, and it was, and I'm not sure this is fully true, so do your research on this, but I know parts of it are. Women produce some of their sex hormones from the adrenals, which means if you're stressed out and overburdened, you're not going to produce your sex hormones, which is going to shift you more toward testosterone and adrenaline, which is why women tend to need more sleep because they need to recover so that their body can produce those hormones and operate as a woman. Whereas men, we have testicles. We produce the majority of our testosterone from our testicles, which have nothing to do with stress responses, although stress will eventually lower that ability to be up. It's not as a direct correlation. So therefore, men in studies need less sleep and less rest. Just the way that our bodies are built. And again, I'm not 100% on that. I'm actually digging into it a little bit because I was like, wow, that's pretty big if that's fully true. But we're different. Our bodies are different. We have different hormones. And it's not to say one's greater or lesser. We're just different.
Yeah, it's interesting too. My brother and I were talking about this recently about how we were raised. Our dad was prior military, and we were raised with very much of like a go get 'em personality, and you have to be a leader and you have to kind of go. And I was just discussing with my brother how I just always feel this need that if I can, I must. And he said, that's such a masculine perspective. And as you were describing these traits of this woman, I was thinking, gosh, that sounds so masculine, like this sort of like hunter mindset. If you go back to this sort of like primal paleo like perspective of men and women and what we were designed for. And like these men were meant to like protect and to fight and to sort of like be out there on the front but isn't that like women are taking that on now? We're taking on all these things. We have to just go, go, go. And that's really not what our bodies were designed to do. So our bodies are obviously turning on us because we're not treating a woman's body as a woman's body should be treated. That it makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah. And I've got women all day, every day that I work with. I mean, I've looked up my Instagram following and more than 100,000 people. It's like 92% women. So maybe I have a bias from just who's in my clinic, who I'm working with, but I work with men and women. And what I'm seeing is overall, just there's certain personality types that end up with stress issues, dysautonomia, POTS, mast cell, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. I'm usually the guy that like the most chronic people end up in my clinic because I talk about this stuff. I'm opening up to it and I've dug deep into it. And some of what I'm finding is if you have a perfectionistic type personality and you have a harder time compromising with things in life, not necessarily like your husband or your wife, but just like the paint on your wall, the ding in your car, the way the food's prepared, whatever it is that you want. Like you have this picture in your head and you want it that way, and you're unable to, and when I say unable, maybe unwilling is a better word, or you haven't trained yourself to let go of some of that, it puts you in a state where you're constantly a little more stressed, which leads down that path where you're going to go through all the cascade that we've talked about and end up depleted of your minerals, where you crash and you have a hard time getting out of your bed. Men, like I said, we tolerate this a little more because we have a little more resiliency within our adrenals based off of what I'm reading into on the testosterone front, like I just mentioned. So the majority of the people that are coming into my clinic with these nervous system dysregulations are women. They're women, a lot of them that, and before they got to me, even into health, it was, okay, I got sick, so I went to 40 doctors and I did all the intense stuff. I did hyperthermia. I did IV antibiotics for Lyme disease. I did cold plunge. I did that really crazy elimination diet for an entire year. And like their list of what they've done was incredible. And I applaud them. I'm like, wow, I couldn't do that diet for a year. No way. And they're on 40 supplements that they diligently take every single day, and they're still getting worse. And I'm like, hey, so we're going to do something a little different. And we're going to start off with, do you live in a safe place? So we go down, is your air clean? Do you have mold in your home? Are you eating food that's mostly clean? Are you drinking water that's clean? You're using hygiene products that are clean and safe. And that also means cleaning products in your home, that sort of stuff. So are you living in an environment that is safe? That's step one. Once we answer that question, and concurrently, not necessarily separately, but just in my note, one then comes the next, right? Like that's how you read the paper. The second part is, do you feel safe in the environment now that we have curated to be safe? And so many people don't. So, if you're listening right now and you're connected to what we're saying and I touch you on the shoulder, will you jump? If the answer is yes, you're probably a little jumpy, which means you're probably in a bit of a unsafe feeling, because if you're truly feeling safe, a lot of times we're not very jumpy. The next thing, drop your shoulders. Can you drop your shoulders? Are you able to just let your shoulders relax? Are they going to go down a half an inch? That means you probably have a little protective mechanism. You're protecting your neck, which is a vulnerable area. So your shoulders are up. I don't know hardly anybody these days in westernized countries that don't have their shoulders up at some point during the day. That is a sign of nervous system stress. So you've got those two pieces of the puzzle. If you have them, then we need to do nervous system work. So I start off people with vagus nerve retraining. There's a great program out there called Primal Trust. It's a phenomenal brain retraining. It's limbic, somatic, and vagus nerve retraining. Kathleen put that together. That's who I called for my wife. It's educational. It's got groups. I can't say enough about it. And there's several others out there, but this is the one that my clients just rave about. It's the first one I've ever found that clients are just like, thank you for getting me to do this. If you use my name, Dr. Jaban, DRJABN, you get it 10% off your first month. The next thing that you get is EMDR is a type of therapy. If you want to go to a therapist, it's phenomenal. Emotional freedom technique, which is the tapping acupuncture points. But then there's neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is sound, light, and color therapy. And the way I do it is I use a machine from a company called ClearMind. They have a setting in it called PTSD. And I accidentally figured this out. If you put somebody that's in a major stress state into the PTSD trauma setting, and this does not mean that you had to be abused or beaten or anything actually that you personally recognize as PTSD, you just have been stressed out for a long time, or you're just stuck in fight or flight. If I put you into that and I do 10 sessions in a week, so I'm not doing them slowly like most people do with neurofeedback, where they do like 1 session or 2 sessions a week for extended period of time. I'm doing 10 in a week. It like cuts through that fight or flight state and now allows you to use the primal trust to actually train yourself into getting into a better state. Because if I don't do that, your walls are sometimes for people I'm working with, I mean, they are sky high. Your protective barriers and your guard is up so high that breaking that down and getting you to let go of some of that nervous system protection is so high it's hard. So the neurofeedback cuts through it and allows us to move forward. For instance, I've had people come in with tons of food allergies or chemical sensitivities, or, like they walk by, I don't want to say specific names, but that fragrance store at the mall and they get a headache. That means your body's overreacting to those insults of the toxins that you're breathing, which isn't good for you. But a lot of times to have a headache for 2 or 3 days is an overreaction. So it brings all that down. I've had people who are having near stroke-like reactions walking into big box stores because of all the scents, and it stopped it. And they were able to actually go to the grocery store again.
Interesting. All right. I need to ask some more questions about this because I assumed, because I'm that way, like if I walk, I will not walk into those stores. It's like a bad energy for me almost. Like I feel like almost like I'm going to have like an anxiety attack. And I just assumed that was a good thing because I had so detoxed myself that now I'm sensitive to it and I don't, my body can't handle that. Tell me more about that.
So people that are hypersensitive, and there's a different level. Like if I go out with my buddies and I eat a junk burger, not organic, whatever. Yeah, I'm going to put on like 2 pounds of inflammation and I'm going to have some loose stool. Like my body's like just letting it out. And I don't do that often, but when I do, I know it. I'm like, gosh darn it. I'm not going to do that again for 3 or 4 or 6 months. But if you are a person that walks by those stores and has a negative reaction, more so than a little bit of postnasal drip, a little bit of like, oh, like, yeah, that's bad. I know that. Maybe even a scratch in your throat for a moment. If it goes beyond that, then your body's overreactive. And it's a hyper response that likely means that you have some sort of, and some people don't connect with the word trauma, but that's the word I use, some sort of trauma wrapped around those toxins, or your immune system, which is what I call it, autoimmune PTSD. Your body is overreacting because at some point it's had to defend itself. So in your case, you probably got into this just like most of us because your health was assaulted and you had to do something to get out of it. And you did, and you feel a lot better. But now you still have this PTSD stuck in your immune system, and you react that way when you go to places because the body should be pretty resilient. And that's why I tell people with food allergies, you have this curve. So it's, you have food allergies. You probably can eat them without having anaphylaxis. You just don't feel well. And then we cut them out and we start getting you stronger. So I watch your blood work get better. I watch your minerals build back. I watch the infection titers go down. So you're getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. When you reach the top of that curve, now your body, when you put in a food allergy, is going to have a major reaction. Maybe not anaphylaxis, but you might have diarrhea. You might get a sore throat. Like, you're not going to be happy because your body is now strong enough to mount the appropriate reaction to the food that it could not mount before when it was weaker. And then once you go over that curve and you fix that immune response and you retrain your brain that those foods are not actually bad for you. So let's say for me, it was almonds, chicken, dairy, all berries I was allergic to when I had Lyme disease. I would get sore throats, black eyes, diarrhea, stomach cramping when I ate those foods. And then once I got my body retrained and out of that, I can eat those foods all I want, anytime I want, with no reaction. Because now my body understands that's not that bad. Now, those chemical toxins you're talking about are still bad, but your body should be able to recognize it. And then when you leave, push out what was there and be fine.
Yeah. So it's an appropriate detox response that your body's able to get rid of what it doesn't need and not kind of crumble while it does that.
Exactly.
So this technique you're talking about, is this something that's like nationwide that like practitioners are doing? Is that something that people can find someone in their area to do this?
Neurofeedback is nationwide. Neurofeedback, the way I do it, is not, because like I said, I'm doing it in a really weird way. I've had to negotiate with practitioners and other places from clients of mine, like, hey, this is the protocol I do. Can I send them to you? I get no kickback. All right. Like, there's no money coming back to me. You're making the money. It's on my recommendation. Will you do that? And some will say no. And I'm just like, come on. And some have said yes, and now they'll do it for me. And now I keep sending more and more people back to those practitioners. So there's a practitioner in Dallas that has done it for me, Arizona that's done it for me. I'm here in Kansas City, Missouri that does, and I do it. I'll be honest, I do it super cheaply because I just want people to do it. And we set up like that retreat style where people just come in, they fly in Monday, by noon they're doing a session, 4 p.m. they're doing a session, they do 2 sessions a day, fly home Friday. And by the cost that we charge, it's honestly like the hotel and the treatment is less than what you could do it in California or New York or, big places. So come hang out, watch Chiefs game, do it with us. We just do it. We're doing it differently. But if you can find a provider that has a clear mind neurofeedback unit that is willing to do 10 sessions in the PTSD that fits you best, which I evaluate for my clients and tell them what to do, then yeah, it can definitely be done. And there are providers out there. I don't want to feel like I'm the best and the only. There are providers that I found that do understand the nervous system and are able to help that. The majority of neurofeedback providers, though, are doing something like for specifically ADHD or anxiety, and it's a session or two. It's not nervous system specific targeting, and that's just not their direction for their practice. So it's not as easy as I'd like it to be found, but they are out there.
So I know you talked about the EFT. I know there are like some apps out there that people can use for that. And, my husband and I have had great luck with that. We went through a really stressful time last year, and he thought I was kind of nutty, and I was like, just do this thing, just see how it works. And he was like, it got to where like in the evening, he's like, hey, can we get your app out and do that EFT thing? Cause he really felt like a difference, like right away. That is super effective. Can you speak to that just a little bit and why that's helpful?
For sure. I won't claim to be an expert on this. I use different apps or providers for that to refer to. But EFT, I am trained in meridian therapy or acupuncture. I got my national board certification. EFT is basically tapping acupuncture points in specific patterns that help to regulate your nervous system. When you work with somebody that's doing this, they are allowing for their body to just basically get a signal. I mean, call it Morse code to your body. You're tapping in like, hey, I know you're stressed out, but we're okay. Subconscious, chill out, relax. Without better terminology, I like to be very, very lay with my definitions on things like that. But that's what I think of it as. And that usually comes across as what's going on. And people just feel so much better by doing that because you are mindfully doing a behavior to regulate your nervous system, which is something that we've lost when we're scrolling on TikTok or stuck in front of a computer screen or in front of a TV. And just so everyone's aware, the things that we do as a culture these days, which are all the ones I just mentioned, the screen is constantly flickering and changing, and your body picks up on that even though you don't at a subconscious level. So imagine if you had the end of a movie going by and it's all those names. Now speed that up to where you can't tell that that's going by. It just looks like there's a white in the middle of the black because all the names are the white blur. That's what your body's picking up on every time you're looking at a screen, and it has to deal with that. So when you separate yourself from that and just do something mindfully, especially if it's tapping specific acupuncture points that help us regulate the subconscious, it allows for your body to get to a rest state and feel calm versus laying in bed and scrolling your social media.
You mentioned the word calm, which reminds me of a post that I saw where you talked about trying to stay calm when you're not calm can actually have adverse effects in the other direction. Talk to that.
Yeah, so a lot of people that come in, they try to convince themselves that they're okay. I'm good. I'm okay. I'm calm. I'm not in pain. I'm not depressed. I'm not anxious. You're putting so much energy into convincing yourself of that without doing something. Sometimes it actually creates more of a problem because you're stressing yourself out about being calm, and it ends up just being a problem. It ends up just creating more of an issue. And not doing anything isn't the same as actively doing something that's healthy for your nervous system. So when I told someone to go stare at a tree, it was because I couldn't get them to do anything else. They were just stuck in their routine and life. So the first step for me was like, just detach, just simply detach. That isn't necessarily going to be fully healing in and of itself. That's not dealing with the subconscious habits or dealing with the autoimmune PTSD or dealing with the actual brainwave patterning that is elevated due to the way that you live your life. Which when we do neurofeedback, we can map out your brainwave patterning and see where you're elevated and suppressed, which can lead to us going, okay, well, because of this pattern, you just get irritable at like everything. Okay, you have temporal lobe elevation of energy. So that's what we're seeing, right? So just simply going, I'm calm. I'm going to be calm. I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to do anything. And kind of being a little short and trying to convince yourself of that, unfortunately, is not going to get the job done. You've got to actually do active care if you're stuck in a state of fight or flight and it's become a habit for your body.
So, what are some other sort of at-home remedies that people can try just to kind of get started? And then I also do want to talk about what you have available for people who maybe would like more than just at-home remedies.
Yeah. So some things to do at home that are pretty easy. You can get things like binaural beats. They're on YouTube. Look them up. Just play music in the background of your life. That is calming. You can do the EFT like we talked about. I have vagus nerve posts on my Instagram that you can go look at so that they can help guide you to do some vagus nerve work, such as humming, singing, cold showers, or even if that's too much, cold cloth on your face to just help calm the body down. Simply exercising. Exercise can be good, especially without technology, to allow for yourself to rest. And this is not when I'm saying exercising, going and killing yourself at the gym, going for a walk, going for a swim, just being connected to yourself. Those are some really good things that a lot of people are doing. The Home Primal Trust, which is an at-home membership, again, just to bring that back up, that's a phenomenal one. Now, those are all brain work things. The thing that I don't want to miss out on in this conversation is brain work's a big piece, but if you have infections such as Lyme disease, parasites, if you're dealing with IBS, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, any autoimmune disease, there is a toxic or infectious connection that you're dealing with on top of maybe the nervous system work that you need to do. So as long as you're dealing with those toxins in your food, your air, your hygiene products, as long as you have potential infections in your body, you're going to have to do what I put in as my third tier. So the first tier was safe place, then feel safe. The third tier is, okay, we got to go in and actually clean you out, cleaning the stuff out that doesn't need to be there. That's stressing your system. When I get into that tier, it's, okay, let's replenish the things that have been depleted, all the minerals that we've talked about. Let's optimize your B vitamins and D and iron, those things that maybe you've depleted because of a gut that isn't absorbing appropriately. Let's add some strength to your detoxification pathways, which are your liver, lymph, gallbladder, so that you can clean out the toxicities that you've been around your entire life. And then from there, that's when we actually start putting in binders to bind up toxins if you've tested or know that you've been around toxicity. So we bind those things up and get them out of your body. And then the last step is we talk about those infections. So if you do have an active infection that is stressing your system, then we have to deal with that situation so that we can once and for all completely get your body back to a state of homeostasis, at least in the moment. It's an ever-going life journey to keep healthy. But once we get you really strong, your body's extremely resilient and able to maintain itself pretty well with just normal, at least normal to myself, habits like the safe place section that I talked about earlier of living in a safe environment, eating well. So you don't have to be on a protocol forever, but until we get you strong, it's the same thing as, if you have the Jenga and I pull the block out and it all falls down, we've got to rebuild you. And once you're rebuilt and all your blocks are back in place, you're pretty strong, you're pretty stable. But until we get you there, it's going to take some work. So
for the person who is maybe a little overwhelmed and thinking, I don't even know where to start, and maybe would like some more individualized counseling, what do you have available?
Yeah. So we post free stuff across our social medias every single day just to give you information for free. From there, we have several options. So I have a clinic. We have 5 doctors. 4 doctors, 1 nurse practitioner. Not to take anything away from her. She's brilliant when it comes to hormones. She's our hormone expert. And then we are here to serve and support and educate and teach and just take you down that path, run the labs, understand where your body's at, and be able to give you a completely custom to you plan that we will walk you through and support you. And if within that, we have health coaches that can help you with your diet, with your nervous system, and just give you that concierge care. If that's something that maybe sounds a little too much, we also have online courses that are on our website. And by doing those online courses, we have a parasite course, we have a gut course if you have gut issues, we have a mold course, and we have one that would probably really fit your group well, which is the Health Foundations course, which just walks you through the basics of making sure that you're in an environment that's safe and healthy, and that you at least have an idea of what could be affecting you. That course doesn't take you through absolutely every option for what will get you better, because it's just really, its purpose is to help you get started, to get a base of information that will allow you to take your health under control and get well.
And you offer like consults remote, right? You can do that anywhere nationwide.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have people all around the world from pretty much every state and country.
Man, like I think the one good thing that came out of the pandemic is that we all kind of realized that we could do things over the internet that we probably wouldn't have done before.
Absolutely. I was about 50-60% virtual before the pandemic, and then after it's just like exploded because it's so popular now.
Yeah, that's such a great resource because and that's the thing that's tough is like you may not live in an area where you have access to knowledgeable practitioners who understand this whole body approach, who understand the effect of parasites and Lyme and mold and all these things. I feel like so many people kind of turn to the alternative health direction because they've just been let down by allopathic practitioners who are like, yeah, we don't know what's wrong with you. Try this pill and see what happens. And so I think having access to that is so important because, and by the way, if you don't follow Dr. Jaban, it's at Dr. Jaban Moore on Instagram. And I'll also link that in the show notes. But you have a ton of amazing just posts and reels and things like that that are really excellent. But that can also in and of itself be a little overwhelming because it's like, okay, I see a lot of this, but I don't know exactly how to apply this specifically to me and my situation. So I feel like that's a big step. If that's something that you have the budget for, getting that individualized care is really helpful and important because you can sort of be like, well, I think maybe I might have these symptoms because of this, but you don't actually know that without labs and without sort of more digging.
Absolutely. There's a lot to health. You know, I've got clients that spent 20 years trying to do it on their own. And finally they decided, let me bring in some help. And we were able to see some really amazing changes. And it's not to say that you can't do it on your own. It's just, there's a lot to it. There's a lot. And my day all day is not only just working with people for the last 10 years, it's also researching and going to conferences and networking with doctors. But I tell you what, one of the secret weapons that I have is I talk to patients every day and I listen to them and I listen to what they've researched. And then I put together the information from all the doctors I know, the conferences I go to, the experiences that I've had, and everything that all the patients have been through. And that helps me form a guide to what is the latest, greatest, best way to support someone.
Yeah, that, it's talking about, being a mom, especially being a crunchy mom who likes to research things. You just can't research everything. And just when I think like, okay, I've researched water and I've researched food and I've researched, how to grow a garden. And I feel like I know all the things. Then someone will post something that I'm like, oh God, I haven't researched that thing yet. And it's just like, it's a lot, it's overwhelming. And, one thing, we live on a homestead and we live, around a lot of other homesteaders who are all kind of like in this community together. And one of the things we always talk about is like, we don't all have to know all the things. You can be the bread person and you can be the vegetable person and we'll be the cattle people. And like everyone can have their thing that's their gifting that they've had the time to research. And that's why like living in community and like having other people who like, hey, you don't have to be an expert in this. Like I can help you with this thing that I know a lot about. And you can help me with this thing that you know a lot about. I think that's so important to like realize like where you can't do it all. And you cannot be a mom and like have kids and do all the things you want to do and know all the things about your body. That's why having someone like you that's so knowledgeable that we can sort of trust and be like, okay, you've done the work, you've done the research, you have the qualifications. I'm definitely like an ask questions person, but at the same time, it's like, I just don't have enough time to ask all the questions that I want to ask. So it's great to have a resource like you that you've already done the work and you're living it out, man. Like it's so cool to see like what you're doing with your wife and how like this is actually like impacting your life and it's real. It's real to you. You're not just saying to your clients like, hey, do this stuff. Like this was what, you're using in your family and seeing results with as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to live it if you want to lead other people to it. You've got to be able to live congruently. Otherwise, people aren't going to resonate with you. I mean, that's so important. And the same thing goes with when people call me and, like I said earlier, do I have a burger every once in a while? Sure. Every once in a while, there's something that goes into my body that's not perfect. And when I tell people like, oh, so I don't have to be perfect forever. No, you got to get well. And once we're well, you'll have some ability to adapt, which is what so many people are missing. And what you just said was kind of funny to me. You're like, it'd be overwhelming to learn all the things about homesteading. Well, exactly. It would be overwhelming, which would stress your nervous system and put us back into this conversation that we started.
Yeah. So being able to like let go and be like, okay, here's something I can't know all the things about. Let me find someone else who knows that and sort of work together and to take that off our plates. Because as moms, we kind of want to take everything on our plate. And so, yeah, it just goes back to your point of learning how to let go of those things. I love the word you said, you have to train yourself to learn to let go of those things. That's a muscle you have to grow that I think a lot of people don't realize that you have to train yourself in that.
Absolutely. At some point when you were a kid, you said no to everything, probably. We had to get you back to a little bit of that.
Yeah. So if you had one final piece of parting advice for our listeners, what would that be?
Take one step immediately today, implement that, allow it to become a habit, and then take the next one. Don't try to do everything. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just go stare at a tree for 20 minutes. Go from there.
Thank you so much for your time. What a blessing you've been and just such a wealth of knowledge. We appreciate you so very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Naturally Noelle Show, empowering you to live a more natural life, one step at a time.